Thank you. So with that being said, I am hopeful that you will still get all of the benefit that we've always provided you. Thank you to our speakers. While we did lose the best practice information, we still have some dynamic need to know information as we are in this school year. So I'm very grateful to our speakers, not only for the presentations they provided, but for being here today with us for the question and answer segment. I also want to say a special thank you to the conference committee, because it did take all of us, especially early June, when we were having to make some very difficult decisions, not knowing where we were going to progress with this conference. So it was not something easy for us to determine. We all looked at the benefits. We did not have much information where we were going to be at in the fall, and we tried to make the best decision possible, moving to the virtual format. So thank you to the committee for that, and all of the board for MCPA for everything they do. And another special thank you to Patricia Jones, because she is our live binder queen. So without her, we would not have all of the access to the resources that you do have access to. So she always does dynamic when it comes to that. So I'm very grateful to her also. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to all the participants. Thank you to all of the board members. Thank you to our speakers. It takes all of us. Kind of like the whole village thing. It takes us all to get done what we get done. So I am hopeful, if you listen to the presentations on Live Binder, you're going to hear that we're always seeking new leaders and new members to step into the board role. Cynthia and I were just chatting at the beginning. Never ever did I think that this would be how my conference would go, the year I had to plan a conference. So if I can do it, anybody can do it. I've been through the polar vortex with meetings that have had to be rescheduled. We have now COVID that we're having to operate under. So trust me, anybody can do it. And it does take all of us to support it. So thank you. Couple other just housekeeping things. As you listen to the Live Binder presentations, it talked about how sketches are going to work. So if you did not listen to that portion of the presentation, I had a little bit of a introduction to it. And then Irene did a beautiful job kind of detailing that further. So if you have questions, please review that, because that will go through that portion. There is going to be in the future a board meeting for your regional level. And so make sure that you're reaching out. If that individual doesn't reach out to you, make sure you reach out to them to ensure that you are getting that information too. So with that being said, we are basically, here go the grinding glasses. So with that being said, we're basically going to go through the agenda, and I'm going to allow everybody to put in the chat. In my head, this is how I think it's going to happen. We are going to put in the chat based on the topic area. So we're going to start off in order. So starting off with Selena Mills and her topics. So she basically has the state update as far as work-based learning and that continuum, virtual work-based learning, and then CTE and work-based learning reporting. So we're going to stay honed into those topics right now. Let's start off with work-based learning continuum. So if anybody has questions, needs clarification, additional information provided, if you could type it into the chat, I will field those questions and give her the opportunity to answer. If something does not come up right now, but it comes out later, just make a note of it, because as we move on to the different topics, we'll be able to revisit everything at the end in case something was missed and we need to revisit that too. Thought I heard something. As you look ahead, you'll see, again, as you're looking through Selena, she does have 3 topic areas. So the continuum, virtual work-based learning, and then CTE and work-based learning reporting. So if there's nothing on the continuum as far as that spectrum and what that entails, then we'll go to the next one. So just start thinking ahead. First question, could you clarify documentation requirements for virtual work-based learning?
Oh, Mark, that's a good question. One that I don't have a full answer to yet, to be honest. So I can tell you that for virtual work-based learning, you'll want to use the same documentation that you've been using for non-virtual work-based learning, but I don't know that there's any additional pieces. This is something that's really new to us, so I don't have a great answer for you yet. I think that we're going to keep looking at it as things come up, and I would just also be really cognizant of what you need to do for pupil accounting if it interacts with that as well. So I would say, for that virtual piece, there is some flexibility for you as far as having things signed virtually. So that question has come up, and that's okay to have things signed virtually. it's okay to, you know, to pass things back and forth in that virtual space. And then I would document maybe even better than you normally would, just because it's new and we don't know what kind of questions are going to come up afterwards. So I would keep track of what policies that you create around it and what kind of local decisions that you make about virtual. And then I'll keep you posted as I know more.
I know we have a couple additional questions, so I'm going to come back to that too. But in reference to pupil accounting, I think that is something that when it comes to documentation, let's make sure we are all aware of that. Count date is Wednesday. So you're going to want to know what your auditors are going to be looking for if you are running a virtual format. I think that's something to kind of keep on your radar and make sure, again, that you always have the communication with those auditors. And then the other thing, Selena, can you also clarify as far as visits? Are visits still going to be face-to-face visits as we've conducted in the past, even if they're in a virtual environment?
You know, I asked Brian Solosky about that. And we think that there's the ability to maybe do some things creatively, but that's more of a pupil accounting question. So I will let them tell you what it is that they want. But it is brand new to all of us. So I think that as long as you run it by those folks and ask them, you know, here's what I'm proposing to do and here's what it looks like, I think that they're really reasonable about that. From a CTE perspective, we're going to kind of follow their lead. So
perfect. So we have some follow-up questions. Can we count it and track is the next follow-up.
The virtual?
Yes.
I'm assuming? Yes, I would. I would just use that continuum guidance and I would count it following that guidance. Now, if you look at the continuum on the back side of that document, it gives you some examples for each of those categories. And in each of those categories, one of them actually has virtual interactions. But I think that in the world that we're currently living in, you could have virtual interactions in any of those categories. So, for example, if you have a virtual career fair, then I would count it in the awareness category where it belongs.
Very good. And then the next question, will it be possible to do the required, oh, it just jumped. Sorry. Would it be possible to do the required visits to students at their site virtually rather in person, which I think is the question I had already asked as far as a virtual site versus a physical site. So again, check with your auditors on that since that is more of a pupil accounting question. And we had another board member, our MTSA rep, that also had stated that she had asked Brian that question from pupil accounting, and he said that if a student is face-to-face at a business site, then a face-to-face visit is required. So Joetta, I did get your email, but I know that we're still getting mixed responses on that. Is the reason that it was asked is I think it's coming out through different parties as far as what that looks like. So again, I would go to your auditor and check with your auditor as far as the visits. Got a question about getting in. Janet, can you put the person's name in the chat that you're saying cannot get in but was registered? And also in that same question, Janet, did they get a confirmation email? So Janet, I think it's Gendelman. If you could just message me back to let me know who it is.
Yes, I will. Yeah, she did not. She did not get the email, but she did register successfully. So okay. Hold on. I'll send it to you in the chat.
If you could. And then Irene, I know you're on here somewhere. Irene, can I text you that person's name and see if you can look them up for me? Thank you. So when I get that, I'll screenshot it and send it to you. Next question. Can a student be placed in a paid work-based learning experience through a temp agency?
We are still looking at this. This question has come up, and so I don't have a great answer yet. Again, this is something brand new, I think, for us. So that's something that I'm asking about, and I'll try to find the answer for you so that you can post it.
Thank you. Give me 1 second to help with this. Okay, Irene, I just texted it to you. hopefully my service works in here. I'll see if I can forward that to you too, because I don't always get messaging opportunities at this office. Give me 1 second. Okay, Irene, I put it in a private chat too also, in case my text messages are not going out. I'm in a block, a block room. It's basically like a hideout area, so there's not
Nicole,
much in and out. Yes.
there was also a question from Deborah Roshak. She had a person who was trying to enter too. I don't know if it was the same person, but if Deborah could let us know if that was the same individual that was trying to enter.
Yes, thank you. I did not see that message come through. She is all set. So thank you, Deborah. I see that message now. Very good. Okay. So I'm looking right now. I'm not seeing. There's the next one. I have a teacher with a student requesting to work at home for their parents' business. Can they be placed there as a co-op student? And what would be the specifics required?
Well, again, I would double check this with pupil accounting and make sure that you're following all of those procedures. As far as CTE goes, you could count that as a work-based learning experience if you could show how they were working for their parents and what they were doing for the business that was connecting to CTE. But because you're looking at that co-op idea, there's some pupil accounting questions that probably have to be answered there as well.
Okay, Janet, I just sent you a private message back in regards to that individual. So we'll see if we can get that taken care of. If not, I'm going to have you message Irene from here, Janet, and that way we can see what's going on with that individual. The next question is, my county is having, I'm glad this is recorded because I'm not even listening. I'm saying the questions. I'm not listening to responses. My multitasking skills is getting taxed. My county is having a problem with hybrid and virtual students working during the school day. Is there a document that we can provide employers that explains this is prohibited?
Well, it may not be prohibited depending on when they're working and what they're doing. So again, I hate to keep telling you go to pupil accounting, but there's such a crossover between what we do and what the rules are. So I would look at the CTE FAQ document that's on our website. And if you go to the OCTE page, it's down toward the bottom, and that will answer common questions about work-based learning, and it should have the most up-to-date information. And then I would also double check again with pupil accounting and find out how that works depending on how you're reporting that student's class.
Can I jump in there too?
Yes.
Okay, so the Youth Employment Standards Act actually does state that a child who is, they cannot be required to work when they're required to be in school. So we are in line with the feds in saying that if a person's in a hybrid situation, which is varying district to district right now, if they are not required to be in class, they can work. So if they're in a hybrid situation where today is synchronous and they're supposed to be in class, then during that time they should not be working, they should be in class. But if it's an asynchronous day and they're just giving assignments similar to homework, and they can do that anytime during the day, then they're not required to be in school at any part of that day and they can work. So it really is going to vary from district to district when a kid can work.
Thank you, Jill, for that clarification. Thank you. A couple things that I think are going back to the previous question, I believe, about a student being placed with their parents. Mark had added in, do they have workers' comp and general liability? Because that's going to be required regardless of where they're placed. And unfortunately, I was not listening to the dialogue because I was trying to figure out this individual. So that is very important. That is regardless of wherever that student's placed, that is going to be a requirement that must be met. So Mark had said that could possibly be an issue. And then, let's see, Cynthia had added a document. I'm not sure, Cynthia, was that the FAQ? Is that what you added the link to?
Yes, it was on the MDE site.
So if you look there in the chat, she had copied that link for you in regards to that FAQ document that Selena had just referenced. So that is there also. So thank you for that.
Hey, Mary Beth, what's up?
And then the next question is about the training agreement and training plan. And the question is, can I assume the training agreement training plan found in the work-based learning manual is current and meets pupil accounting requirements?
As far as I know, that is current. We haven't changed anything for COVID. So you can still use the same training plans and training agreements that you had before. We are going to be doing some updates on some of the other materials, and those will be coming, but you should be safe to use that this year.
Perfect.
Nicole,
Yes.
it's Janet. She can't get in. She does not have an email.
Okay. Irene, can you look and see if an email was sent to her? I wonder if it went to an incorrect email address or something.
Do you want me to type her email in the chat?
I can send her an email. I'll do that right now.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. Angela is asking if you could expand more about the virtual hospital jobs online that you mentioned in the pre-recorded video.
Oh, Angela, are you talking about virtual experiences at a hospital, or are you talking about some of the virtual options that are provided by things like Zello and other companies? All right, virtual experiences. Well, there's a few different ways that you can do this, and I've seen some neat things. So one of the things that the health teachers often talk about are that, there are experiences that a student can't even normally have. Like, say, for example, you can't bring an entire class in to see a surgery, but sometimes you can connect with a hospital and actually be allowed to see some really neat things. You can see some particular surgeries, you can see some things on cadavers, and so the whole class can see that virtually, and then they have the opportunity to talk to the surgeon afterward. So it's interactive, because although they can't maybe interact during that procedure, they can interact afterwards and ask questions. And I want to say that it's the Cleveland Clinic that does this well, but don't quote me for sure on that one. Health teachers would know that for sure. But that was just something that came up last year before all of this, virtual experience. And teachers were talking about what a great thing it was. And it really is work-based learning. It's meeting the 3 criteria. So that was just a good example that we had.
Thank you, Selena. I'm looking through. I do not believe I've missed any questions. All right, looks like this is from Mary Beth. So it says, Nicole and Jill, I received a different message from Tara Bride indicating that students cannot work during hours they attend school, even at this virtual time. She indicated that according to youth labor laws that they aren't supposed to work before 3 p.m. So Jill, this is what you had just referenced. So she's receiving a different report in regards to students not being able to work according to youth labor law.
Okay, so I don't know when she spoke with Tara, and I will have to check.
Sorry, Jill. I had that question because my students so we're at the technical campus.
Yep.
And on Wednesdays, they don't attend. They don't have to have a synchronous time. It's asynchronous at that time. And the teachers are doing their kind of their office hour type things. So I asked Tara that specifically because we have business partners. My question is, we don't have work-based learning paperwork in yet. So I asked her if they're on a work permit.
Right.
That's what I've indicated for them to continue to do until we can complete putting together our work-based learning paperwork.
Yep.
But her indication to me was a work permit was not allowing students to work during their school time. So if they're sending school as Clarkston Schools, and Clarkston Schools, their scheduled day is normally until 2:50 p.m., then they're not supposed to work before that time, Monday through Friday. That was her indication to me. So that's what I've been indicating to my students, because I can't do work-based learning with them yet.
It comes down to the individual districts and when the kid is required to be in school. So
Okay.
if they're required to be physically at school face-to-face, then that's their school day. If they are required to be logged onto a computer and be in class virtually, then that is their school day, that is their school time. If they have no obligation to school, other than maybe homework, then they can work.
And are they still limited in their number of hours then?
Yes. So for a
Okay.
16 and 17-year-old, it's still 24 hours.
Or during the school week. All right. All right.
There is some
Is
legislation.
there documentation that we can refer to where it says that? Can you provide that to us?
If you look in the live binder, there is an FAQ
Okay,
document that we recently put out.
perfect.
That
Thank you so much, Jill. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Cynthia added
We're going to watch it. We don't know what's going to happen with it. The legislature has introduced a bill that would change the law to say that kids who are virtually learning can work up to 36 hours a week. Whether that's going to get feet and go anywhere, we will see. I personally think that's too many hours.
Mhm.
But we don't write the laws. We just.
Well, and that also then begins to encourage virtual learning as opposed to in-person learning. And are we really about that?
Well, I guess
Just my opinion.
that's a rhetorical question, but right now it's 24, and it's 24 whether they're for the work week that the employer has. If they're in school 1 week virtual or 1 hour virtually for that week, then they can't work more than 24.
Okay.
It's
And
only
like
for
Cynthia asked, it doesn't matter whether it's work permit, work-based learning. It's if they're not required to be in school, they can be working.
Yep, but they're still limited to 24 hours.
Thank you so much for that clarification.
And that's what I was going to say, is Cynthia had brought that point up. And I think that's important. So often terminology really means a lot, and we sometimes use terms interchangeably, and some things are across the board, but other things are very much defined on whatever type of program that we are talking about and whatever type of student we're talking about. So sometimes we are very loose in that, and sometimes it's very specific. So I think that is important to always, if anybody remembers the conference from last year, we were talking about lenses and lanes and all of these things that you always have to think about, what lane are you in and what is it that you are looking at as far as your student in your program? And then what lens are you looking through? Are you looking at it through pupil accounting? Are you looking at it through CTE versus non-CTE? So there are a lot of intersections that you do have to kind of navigate. So just keep that in mind too when you are thinking about some of these items that we're discussing. There was a question brought up about workers' compensation and liability insurance. It says, are workers' comp and liability insurance required for both paid and unpaid internships? And then it says, I had an employer state they saw a presentation that state unpaid learners, when people add it, throws it, that unpaid do not need workers' comp. So asking if it is required workers' comp and liability for both paid and unpaid, and then an employer had stated they heard unpaid do not need workers' comp.
So to my knowledge, they need it whether it's paid or unpaid. So if you're crossing the threshold for any period of time and placing students there as a part of their class, and it's a regular thing, it's not just a one-day occurrence, where they're doing a job shadow or something, then they need to have that as part of their paperwork. It just protects you too.
The way that I always clarify it to my business partners and my students is if you are touching something, you have to have the insurance on file. So like a job shadow, like you're indicating, a job shadow, you can't touch anything. So the insurance is not a necessity. An on-the-job training or field experience or unpaid or paid, they're touching something, they're performing something. That's where the insurance, that's how I clarify it to them. Doesn't have to do with the paid or unpaid, it has to do with touching or not touching.
Mary Beth, I think that's a good way to explain it. I think that's helpful.
Okay, next question. Very good dialogue between all of you, and I love everybody's input and sharing of experiences. So perfect. Yay. So far, so good. Knock on wood. Our district is in block schedules, and I'm wondering, are students required to still put in the 10 hours when they are only in my class 2 days a week, but 3 days the next? Isn't it 10 hours?
Go ahead. You were going to say something?
I, unless you have a different answer. I'm not sure if you understand the question that's being asked. Does that make sense to you, Selena? Because we've always referenced things based
A little, but,
okay, so years ago, there was a 10-hour requirement that was attached to students because students were, at that point, a typical schedule would look like a student being released 2 hours a day from school. So therefore, they had to work the equivalent of that to earn the credit, is where that 10 hours statement came from. But I do believe that that was something that was brought up either last year or it might have even been the year before when we were in Mackinac, and they were talking about really that was more of a board policy, that your board is able to really define what it is because it's attached to credit.
Nicole?
I think,
I'm sorry. I just was going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was also connected back to when there was money under traditional co-op that was going to a co-op coordinator. And in order to make sure that the co-op coordinator was receiving money that was attached to something that was actually taking place and wasn't 2 hours here for this student and 5 hours here for this student, that to get that money and have that count, there had to be a minimum of 10 hours for students. And then that money went away. And then it became board and district related because maybe parents didn't want their students out working more than 10 hours. So it wasn't a restriction anymore or a requirement. But I do think it was connected to money in the past that no longer is available for coordinators.
Probably when we used to do CEDIS reporting. We used to be able to report work-based learning in CEDIS years ago. So it was probably from that is when you talk about connection to the coordinator. It's probably when you do your CEDIS expenditures report, it was probably something that was pulling off of that data back years ago. So I'm not sure if that clarification is the best, but I believe the last conversation I had heard was that was a board policy because you're attaching it to credit. And therefore, what does a student need to do to earn that credit for those classes?
And that would be my understanding as well. I hear of this more kind of attached to that school to work idea and not so much attached to CTE. So for CTE, we have a lot more flexibility because they're technically getting credit for the CTE class, and work-based learning is a component of that. So it's possible to put someone out for, you know, a varying schedule each week based on where they're going and what they're doing.
I will say I still use the 10-hour rule because our students, we have a traditional 6-period schedule, other than right now. We typically have a traditional 6-period schedule. So when my students are in work-based learning, they are in a 2-hour block out, whether it's a 5th, 6th, a 6th, 7th, a 7th, 8th, whatever it might be. So they're earning the equivalent of 2 classes. So I still use that as kind of a way to hone in to make sure the experience is enough to award them the credit. So I still use that as my minimum threshold.
Mark put in the chat, which is accurate, that people accounting requires a minimum of 4, maximum of 10 required hours for work-based learning to garner credit.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to jump back. So that's Mark's statement is what Irene just stated. And I know that was a hot topic. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, but I remember we kept circling that topic. the past 6 months feels like years in itself. So really my time is not, I don't really have a good gauge on time right now. Here's another question. I wanted to submit this question. If a student is special ed, can they be put on a general ed training agreement if appropriate to that student? We are trying to reduce the amount of time students are designated as special ed time. Can work-based learning time be counted as general ed time for special ed student? And if yes, what would be the requirements?
Well, I can answer this in terms of CTE. If you have a special education student that's in a CTE class, then they're participating in general ed. So any work-based learning that they do through that CTE program is general ed work-based learning. If they're doing it through their special education program, then that becomes something else, and that's not my area of expertise. But if it's part of their CTE program, then it's general ed.
And I should have looked ahead. I'm trying to monitor these messages, but Patricia just stated we're going to talk about special education later. I do know that many of us, though, do have students with an IEP that are placed in general ed work-based learning. So I have several that I've always had. We do not have a transitions program, but we have work-based learning. And as long as a special education student can meet the requirements of what a general education placement would look like, they look the same as any other student in my work-based learning program. So we've been doing that forever. It's all, again, about what the student's capable of doing when they're in that placement and what support they have going into it as far as related classes, EDP, etc. But we will talk more about that at the end segment. Okay, I think everybody should be in. I don't have anybody in my waiting room, so I think everybody should be in unless it's not popped up yet. And then somebody else just asked me about the waiting room. I do not have anybody in my waiting room right now. Okay. I think I am caught up with the chat. If I've missed somebody as I was glancing through those, I'm trying to see right now, and I don't think I've missed anything. But if for some reason I did miss your message, if it scrolled before I got a chance to get to it, if you want to go ahead and type it in, we'll make sure we cover that. I don't want to move on until you felt like you've had it. Okay, we do have another question. Go ahead, Beth, if you want to go ahead and type in your question, I can restate it, and then if we need clarification, we'll allow you to clarify that. And same thing with anybody else that has any questions. If you just want to put them in chat, we'll go ahead and grab those and give you the chance for that clarification. I'm just waiting.
While we wait on that, Nicole, I just wanted to say congratulations to Rachel. She's a wonderful honorary representative of the MCPA. We don't get to do that when we don't meet in person.
Thank you so much, Mary Beth. Thank you. Thank you. You're so sweet.
Yes. Congratulations on behalf of all of us, Rachel. Very deserved.
Thank you. I'm very honored, very humbled. Thank you.
Can we all unmute and give her a hand?
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you. You are all just too sweet. Thank you very much. I would have video going, but I live in the country, and so I don't want my Zoom to crash, so we just get audio. Sorry.
We understand. Okay, I'm still waiting for questions to come through. While we're waiting for that, I just want to say thank you, Selena. I know this is not easy. It's kind of like you're in the hot seat and questions are just coming at you and you're put in the pressure of having to answer them at that time. So thank you for doing so with always a smile on your face and so eloquent. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. No problem. I know this is a confusing topic,
It is.
and it doesn't help that this is a confusing time. So that makes it even worse.
Right. So the question is, the live binder materials express the importance of getting the work-based learning training agreements and plans in by count. But if we are offering students a CT work-based learning experience and it's not a class in their schedule, we don't need to meet the count first cutoff, right?
Beth, that's been my understanding as well, because you're counting their CTE class as their credit. So the work-based learning experience, I mean, it could pop up in the middle of the year somewhere, and then you just do the documentation as that happens. So,
Correct. Because
so
if
yeah,
it's,
you should be okay.
if it were its own line item, that is going to be what's audited because it's going towards the FTE from that line item of your work-based learning placement. Your FTE is going to be attached to your work-based learning class, your CT class. We always worry, do not, there's several times and I've been doing this for a long time, and I still have to check myself or ask my counterparts, like, wait a minute, I'm reaching out to the board. Like, sometimes we just need that clarification. So don't ever hesitate, you know, and this is a great time to plug in for the regional reps, because your regional rep really is a great contact. If they do not know the answer, they have everybody else to be able to ask the question off of. So use the benefits of the membership. Contact your regional reps as needed with any questions you have. And if they can't field it, they can find somebody else to field it. And if you have a burn in your belly to be a regional rep, reach out to us for that too, because we're always seeking people. This is like a commercial.
And Nicole, if I can just add to that too, Beth, make sure that your attendance matches that documentation. If you are marking that your students are out somewhere on work-based learning, yes, you need to have that paperwork in prior to them going out, I guess. So for sure by count. But if what they are doing is not putting them on site anywhere, then that paperwork does not need to be in place on count. So it's really a pupil accounting thing too, that you want to make sure, and I've had to indicate to my instructors, even if they've been doing virtual field trips but have not left and gone, you know, over the threshold, that is not work-based learning in the sense of attendance and pupil accounting.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? We'll move on to Jill. And like I said, if there's something that comes back up, we're kind of, a lot of these boundaries are crossed anyway. So if it goes from one area to another, we're just trying to, as best we can, segregate between the questions. But if it comes up, sometimes they do cross those. In Selena's PowerPoint, it mentions additional work-based learning documents coming out. Can you expand on that a little?
Oh, yes. I'll give you the inside scoop. In fact, can I share my screen?
You should be able to.
All right. Oh, it says host disabled.
Oh, am I able to do something to let you share?
I don't know. Well, let me tell you what's coming.
I'll make you a host. I'm going to try to make you a host.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. Let me know when that's there, and I'll walk you through it right now.
And if I get lost, I get disconnected, I'll be back.
Okay.
I'm wanting to add.
So the fall update is coming at the end of October. So we're rushing to try to get these materials done by then so that we can release them to CTE directors and then get them out to all of you. Oh, perfect. It does say I'm the host, so let me try sharing again. All right. Okay. So I'll share a draft with you, and now I'm looking in a funny place because my draft is, you know, is over there. So just ignore where my eyeballs are here. So we're working first on guidance for CTE virtual work-based learning opportunities, because we know this is a huge question. So we're trying to model this after the continuum. So what we've got is just a little bit of information about virtual work-based learning opportunities. And then we started to take the ideas in the continuum under each of the categories and give you ideas for virtual work-based learning. Now, I apologize, because if this were me, I would have wanted this like in July or August, not at the end of October. But we're trying to get it out there so that at least you can use it for the rest of the year. So you'll see I mean, this is still in draft form. It's got to go through a little bit of review, but we're giving you ideas virtually for each of these things. And you'll see I still have some notes in here. So, so this is what's coming, and we're looking at some practical examples. So let me see now if I can unshare my screen. Sorry, I lose my mouse. So that's one of the things that we're working on. The other thing that we're working on is kind of a choose your own adventure game, so that you can have teachers or you yourself can take a work-based learning experience. And if you don't know exactly where it's categorized, you can throw it into this choose your own adventure. So it's a PowerPoint and you get a series of questions and you answer yes or no, and it takes you down a certain path. And it tells you if it's work-based learning or not, and if it is, what category it falls into. And then if it is not work-based learning, it tells you what it's missing so that you can just tweak that experience and make it work-based learning. So we've been putting this through the ringer so that we can see how can we break it and where does it not work so we can fix it. So we think we've got it. We think there might be one or two things that don't turn out exactly right. So it's not going to be 100%, but we're hoping for like 99%. So that should be helpful. And then the fall update, we're doing 4 hours of work-based learning with folks. So we're also going to be really working with CTE administrators on what is work-based learning, how does it count, where does it count, how do they record that, so that they have a better understanding of all of it. So once we go through that fall update, all of those resources should end up on our page. So I'm excited because I hope we've got good stuff for you that'll help.
Great question, Denise, to lead into that. That was not planned, but it was good. So thank you.
That was good. That was good.
It was so good. I'm going to see if I can take you back off as host, because my worry is if anybody's trying to get admitted, you're not going to see it. So I'm going to try to play it and see if it'll let me adjust that again. Maybe.
Perfect. I can see someone in the waiting room. Do you want me to hit admit?
Yes, if you could admit them, and I've got to figure out how to take you off and make myself back host again. It's you probably have to. You now have to adjust me to host. So Selena.
Oh, how do I do that?
Yeah, I didn't know either. If you right click over like next to my name, it will say more. I think there's like 3 dots that were there, and it would say more, and then it says like add as host.
Oh, perfect. I've got it. You are back. Oh, see, we are just like students all over again.
This is so much fun. This is just amazing. We're growing and learning and developing in every minute. So thank you. Another question is they want us to add the notice of non-discrimination, but my paperwork has all been signed. Do I need to go back and have them re-sign them to have this added?
You know, that might be a good pupil accounting question as well. From my end, one of the things that I would look at is, are you able to just kind of do an addendum and a notice out to everyone so that they, agree? But double check that with pupil accounting and make sure, because that's the most important people. You want that paperwork to be right for them.
And my thoughts are you're likely going to have to create, similar to what Selena said, some type of addendum for that. But that is something that came up again either last year or the year before. So it has been something that we've had implemented for at least 1 year. So they are going to look for that. I don't remember when it actually was put into place, if it was 2 years ago or the past year, but I know that is something that they will look for. And it seems like the year they announced it at the conference. And I want to say we were at count date or had just passed count date, and they allowed us that year to just create a document to add to the rest of our training agreement and training plan. But again, that was when they first implemented it. So I'm not sure if that would still apply. Check with your local auditor and see what they're going to require. And Cynthia, thank you. I agree. This is going very well. So thank you to everybody for your questions, and thank you again to our speakers for your responses. All right, let's start to transition over. And again, we can be kind of fluid with this, so we can come and go as we need to with the different speakers. But I want to make sure that we give enough time for Jill also to address questions when it comes to youth employment regulations and any necessary updates. So at this point, if there's something that goes back to Selena's topics that you're thinking of or another question, we can try to hold that off unless it's relevant to what Jill is stating, and then we'll just kind of mesh the two. So any questions we have on youth employment, the regulations and the updates? And I'll give it a second for you guys to type that in. Jill, as we're waiting for anybody to put questions down, as they're taking time to type that, are there any like main point highlights besides what you've already provided to us? Is there something to kind of lead that discussion, or things that you really want to make sure that you hone in to make sure everybody's aware of?
Yeah, a couple things. I don't know how many people are issuing officers. Usually we're in person. We usually ask who's an issuing officer. But all of you at work-based learning, it's kind of a catch-22. The law exempts a minor who's on a contract with the school district in a work-based learning situation. But as pupil accounting and CTE will tell you, you have to be in compliance with the law. So even though they're exempt, you still need to make sure you're in compliance. So that's why we go over all the regulations to make sure that the kids are not being illegally employed. And probably the most common things that have come up during the whole pandemic have been the kids working in school during school hours. Can they work? You know, last year maybe they had to be in school from 7:30 to 2:45. This year they have Wednesdays off because they're virtually learning on Mondays, Tuesdays, and in-face Thursday, Friday. And the answer is yeah. If they're not required to be in school for pupil accounting purposes and attendance, then they're not in school and they can work. So that's been a big one. And then the other is the issuing officers. Do they have to, do the minors have to go in person to have their work permits issued? It's really a Department of Ed question, but we've been fielding them until recently. And we're still kind of fielding them because we got some stuff to work out. But right now the executive order is expired. It expired officially on September 1st. So yes, it all has to be done in person now. And then as you all saw with the news over the weekend, and I'm not looking for that Pandora's box, but all the EOs might go away as being non-existent soon. So at least the ones through April 30th would hold. Anything after April 30th would be non-existent. So, but that doesn't mean we're going to say those work permits that were issued electronically are invalid. They're still going to be valid, but from here on out, in person.
Thank you, Jill. And I do have a couple questions. Rachel asked a great question here, and I probably should have elaborated that at the start also. So we really were not taking questions in advance of this live Q&A, but when you create a Zoom meeting that you have to register for, it sends you an auto reply email that states if you have questions to email our board. But that was more for questions in regards to registration. We were not collecting questions in regards to this format. It's just a general Zoom statement. So there was no way, we tried removing it. There was no way to remove it because it's a general statement. So if people have questions in regards to registration, they know who to follow up with. So any questions you have that you need answered during this format, please put them in the chat and we'll ask them through that because there was not a collection source of questions in advance. There is a question right now. If students are 18 or over, do none of these rules matter about when they work or how much?
That's correct. Once somebody turns 18, they're the age of majority. Mom and dad might have something to say about it, but legally, they're the age of majority.
And then another question, when school is in session, a minor may work up to 24 hours per week. If a student is enrolled in a work-based learning program that is part of their school schedule, they have work release time in place of traditional course. Is that time included in the 24 hours, or may that student work 24 hours beyond the time worked during the school day?
From a Youth Employment Standards Act perspective, it is, if they're on a true work-based learning contract between the school, the minor, and the employer, then they're exempt from the law. Now, whether or not CTE or pupil accounting has regulations for making sure you get the FTE on that child's head is a whole nother ballgame. But as far as we're concerned, if they're in a valid contract, we're out.
Thank you. I do want to say too, Selena had mentioned that they are creating a list of FAQs for their office. So if there is something that we do feel is information that we need to put out there for all of the members, I am not writing down questions and answers. I'm trying to monitor everything else. So if there is something that we, probably board members, if there's something you feel is relevant out of the topics that are coming out, let's make note of that so we can make sure we get with Selena and that we can get that documented. If there's a main area of confusion, area that we need clarification, so that they can get that assembled. So it's CTE based is where she's looking for that, those FAQs. And then the next question, if they're a paid experience by the employer, is that the same?
And the answer would be if they're in that contract, what the law says is if a minor has entered into a contract between its school district and its employer to be in one of those work-based learning programs, then the Youth Employment Standards Act does not apply to that minor. You need to make sure you're following your pupil accounting guidelines and your CTE guidelines. But as far as the Youth Employment Standards Act, that makes them exempt.
Thank you, Jill. Additional questions needing clarification?
The other thing we've had a lot of questions about is minors working during the pandemic and their exposure to COVID. And so we have not taken the stance that a minor can't work, that we don't consider that hazardous. We obviously do encourage proper PPE to be worn. And obviously we've had some executive orders that define what kind of PPE has to be worn, and MIOSHA has been going out and enforcing that on employers. But none of us really know what's going to come after Friday. So I mean, we don't know. Now it's going to take a negotiation between the House, the Senate, and the governor to even have any rules set in place on masks or other PPE going forward. So all of that's unknown now.
And I think that's a great point too. I know that we have had some dialogue as a board. Questions have been posed to some of us as far as what we're doing. And I think that, you know, what I've heard from that is it's really, again, a district decision and what your district is looking for. Because if you're putting anything out there stating that, they're going to want to make sure that their lawyers, et cetera, have approved whatever you're putting out there for requirements. Personally, in our district, we just added a whole other safety segment to our safety training before a student is placed that has to do with COVID and making sure that there's an awareness. And then we simply had, you know, the parents sign off on that along with everything else that they're signing off when it comes to a work-based learning placement. But I know that is some districts are being very detailed in that and providing that, you know, information to students and making sure that everybody's aware of the potential liability and concern with safety, and others are not addressing it. So make sure you talk to your district about that. Next one. So a student can work over 24 hours if they have a training agreement with the school.
If it is a valid training agreement signed by all parties and the school district has taken over the supervision of that child's work experience, then yes, from our perspective. Make sure you're okay with CTE and pupil accounting, but from wage and hour, as long as it's a valid contract where the school is picking up supervision of the work experience, then they're exempt.
So I think this is leading to some confusion because there's another question. I thought a couple years ago when they changed the law to a combination of school and work to a certain number of hours, it changed to 24 whether in training agreement or not.
I mean, the law's always had an exemption that specifically says, I mean, I can tell you the verbiage, that a kid who's on a valid agreement is exempt from the law. Now, pupil accounting has rules in order for you to get your head count on your FTE. And I'm sure CTE has rules for their work-based learning. But as far as a wage and hour perspective for youth employment, Section 18 of the law says this act does not apply to or prohibit the employment of a student minor 14 years of age or older by an employer if a written agreement or contract is entered into between the employer and the governing body of the school district, public school academy, or non-public school at which the minor is enrolled. the employment cannot be in a violation of a federal statute or regulation, and a signed copy of that agreement shall be on file in the place of employment before the minor begins employment. So you need to make sure they're not violating one of the federal hazardous occupation orders. And as long as the employer has a copy of the agreement and you guys are picking up the supervision, they are exempt from our law. But it's always been a catch-22 because they're exempt from the law from our perspective, but you still have things you have to follow in order to get your head count.
And Mark made a statement, and I remember this was 2011 when that law went into place, because I was out giving birth to a baby unexpectedly. He came early, and all of a sudden I found out from everybody from the board, like, did you hear this change and this change? I'm like, whoa! So I can remember when that happened. So Mark said it's a difference of interpretation of the same statute between wage and hour and youth employment office. And Jill, he gave you a compliment. He said he likes your interpretation. But that's kind of the same thing.
I want to know, Mark, what's the difference between wage and hour and youth employment office?
So just to be frank, Tara said what another commenter said earlier, which is the 24 hours is a fixed number regardless of work experiences. But I see where you're coming from and how you arrived at what you just said, because the exemption says if you're in work-based learning, then the law does not affect you. So,
Right.
so that's where yours makes sense. But what was stated in a previous meeting, in previous meetings, I should say, is that the 24 hours was a fixed number.
So after the executive order was issued, that Snyder issued, and it coming back to us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I just read what the law said, so.
Yep.
And for anybody that's not attended this conference and this is your first time, this obviously is not the best format to gather all of this information in, but I will say we are notorious for, we have different representatives from different agencies, and it's the same laws, same statutes, but their interpretations are different based on where they are coming from and the guidance of that. So there are times when we do need to kind of talk through what clarification is needed, because some things are a little loose to interpretation, some things are a little bit more defined, some things are a little subjective. So just keep that in mind. This has always been a challenge that we've had at the conference, is trying to make sure that we're gaining the right scope on those things as they're put through. And I'm very grateful, because it does kind of put our speakers in a hot seat, because each of them are looking at things from different angles. So thank you, Jill, for clarifying that for us. And then Lori's asking, where would they find that at, Jill? Where would they find that exemption statement that you had referred to?
I'm typing it right now.
Perfect, thank you. And then Cynthia added, it could also be a difference between a work permit and a training agreement and a training plan. So kind of the same scenarios we've always ran into.
Right. A work permit is in an employment situation where the whole law applies to that minors, as opposed to a work-based learning or an official co-op where the school has entered a contract to take over the supervision of the minor's work experience. That's the exemption. Everything else is not. Well, there are other exemptions, but I'm saying as far as a work permit situation, then the laws apply.
And I think that's a great clarification too, looking at the whole versus an individual experience, where a work permit is governing a variety of students regardless. A work-based learning and a training agreement training plan is very individualized. So I think that's a great clarification to that too. Any other questions in regards to these items with youth employment? Okay, as Jill is looking up that resource, she's going to put it in the chat for everybody. As she's doing that, kind of the same thing, we'll start to transition to transition. So if you want to think about areas, this is definitely a specialty area. And so if you're an individual that works with that, you're kind of looking at everything from all of these other lenses and lanes, along with special education component. So Patricia is going to be, I believe, the person. Patricia, are you speaking on this on behalf of Joetta? Okay. So she'll be kind of our specialist in this area that we'll be fielding questions to. So those of you that do have these type of placements, if you want to go ahead and put those in there. And then Jill just added where to find that information as far as youth employment.
Nicole, before we move on to transition part, I didn't know if you were going to give any time to ask questions directly to Irene or to Shayna about their introductory stuff. If I can take a minute to just ask a couple of questions of that, or do you want those also put in the, I just don't want to do it in the wrong order.
No, there is no specific order. I had to have a plan in my head because I didn't really know how to tackle this. So I just had a plan in my head, not knowing if it was going to work or not. I'm not going to mute you. There's no right or wrong. We can field it however we need to. So Mary Beth, if there's questions for them, for sure, because something that you have a question on, others could have a question on too.
Perfect. So Irene talked in the introduction about her employability skills manual, which she made available, which awesome, love that. But you had indicated, you know, if anybody wants any information on the units or anything to email you directly. Is everything that you put a link to okay to use?
Yeah, so the employability skills manual, and I got to give a shout out to Scott Wills for being my amazing partner in crime. So the employability skills manual, there's a link to that, and that's a PDF document that you can use how you would like. If you would like access to our curriculum, so we have 2 of 4 units completed, and those are Google Forms that I will give you access to, and then I ask you to make a copy of that, and then you can own that from there. So if you are interested, I will put my email in the chat, and I would be happy to send that to you. Just please make a copy, because it would be too hard to make copies for everyone that would like one. But those have the lessons that you can take, as well as oh my gosh, what's it called? The answers to all the questions, if there's a question. What is that called? I can't even recall it. It's too the answers basically in a lesson plan.
The answer sheet, the cheat sheet.
Like your key.
The key. That's what it was.
Ding, 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 ding. And I love that too, because, you know, as I had stated, it's unfortunate that we did have to cut out the best practice. It was just trying to get our hands on how we were going to present everything that you needed to have. And I know many of you are limited in time right now too, whether you're doing virtual, hybrid, etc. So we wanted to be very cognizant of that. But the best practices is one of the, I mean, I feel our conferences are always beneficial, but that's definitely a highlight of taking information that somebody already has out there and being able to take it and modify it to put to your use. It's always nice to have more tools in our toolbox and have something that we can walk away with. So Irene, I thank you for sharing that, because that is something that many of us can reference as needed. And as you see on the agenda, we are hoping to do some more best practice type presentations, webinars, etc., to where you're still getting, if there's things out there, just general knowledge and information shared. That has been something that our MCPA members and board have been wonderful about. We've always been givers, and sharers, and that's what makes us all do what we do. So thank you, Irene, because it's a perfect example of that. So thank you.
Irene, will that be available also for your KRESA CAE program for your middle schools?
Are you referring to the middle school experiences that I shared?
Mm-hmm.
That, I believe that should be a link, or it should be on the PowerPoint, but if you again would like access to that document.
Like to the counselors, and then I couldn't get it. I couldn't get into the Google link because it was specific to counselors.
Okay, I can make that Google link shareable.
Perfect. You also talked about Transio, Is that anything that the state is looking at possibly doing? And this kind of leads to then Shayna's work-based learning tracking system that they do at the Ottawa area ISD. And I don't know who to ask at the state. I don't know if this is a Selena question. I don't really know. Is the state going to be looking at any kind of work-based learning tracking system that then brings the cost down and brings consistency? And if there's movement of coordinators around the state, then, you know, I mean, we all like our individuality. Don't get me wrong. But is there going to be just a consistency on the tracking, maybe? Do you know?
That's why we're looking at Transio, because we have currently an Access database. So we're looking to house all of our information in one place, and we are in progress on that. We have not implemented anything.
Okay, Selena, any thoughts on that?
Well, for CTE, we're looking at tracking all of that CETUS, but I don't know that it's maybe the kind of database that you'd hope for. What we're really doing is taking those codes on the continuum and having folks upload that information. So what it'll do for us as a state is give us a really nice picture of how many experiences students are having and how rigorous they are. But I'm not sure that it's going to get you what you're really looking for. So at this point, we don't have anything that I think will meet your needs in that way.
Okay.
It's going to be like an after the fact tracking system.
Okay.
And Mary
So I will,
oh, go ahead, Shayna.
oh, I was just going to say, everybody's kind of jumping on board with it. So Irene and I have been talking a lot about this. So we use Naviance in Ottawa County, and Naviance is now adding a work-based learning component to their platform as well. So I think that it's a hot button topic for a lot of vendors right now. It will be interesting. So and that's the other great thing about the board is we all kind of use our own different system for it. So we're able to vet a lot of things just by trial and error. So it's definitely something we're keeping our eye on.
Perfect. Perfect. I appreciate that, Shayna.
And I was just going to say, I think in my experience, what I'm seeing is it's basically been county driven. I'm seeing counties looking at programs, software, resources, et cetera. I don't know that we have crossed across the state in that, way, but I am seeing, instead of it being a district level, which it used to be, I'm seeing it be more collaborative across a county and a county choosing that platform. So I think we are going to start moving in a different direction with some consistency, at least in that regards.
Perfect. Thank you. And just wanted to shout out to Irene and Shayna. That was a phenomenal introduction. Great beginning of the sharing of resources, because it just is nice to see what the different ISDs are doing and how they're getting their information out. And you guys did a phenomenal job on that introduction. Thank you so much.
Much agreed. Definitely.
Thank you.
And then I think, Cynthia, if you want to clarify what your question was as far as sharing the opening remarks. Are you talking about if a participant was not registered for the conference, how do they gain access? Is that what you're asking?
Right. So there's so much goodness in that live binder and in the videos and in the opening remarks and the information shared that my thought was, I know because I only could scan through just the small list of individuals that was on my email. I'm sure there was many emails that went out in order to get it out to the entire body, but I know that there's individual CTE teachers, multiple people in Oakland County that are not attending this conference that this information is very valuable for. So my thought was, if I'm able to utilize that welcome video from Irene and Shayna, there's so many good little nuggets in there that I want to just percolate their thoughts. And then when they say, oh, I would like to have the information that this came from, I can say, well, that is in our live binder. And for $10, you can become a member and then increase the member population in the SMOCA region and then get them engaged in MCPA. We've been looking for years on how to increase the population in our different regions of tapping into the resource. And to me, this is an added blessing that was unintended by pandemic. You know, the fact that we've had to do some things non-traditionally and the wealth of information that's coming out of how we're doing things. So it would not be to share the live binder link. It would only be to share the video snippet as we ran through a meeting session, and then engage them in furthering their access to information by putting their membership in.
I would not be opposed to that. I will say, you know, we did know our conference numbers were going to be less this year for several reasons. One, the format. Two, people didn't know what positions they were. Three, they didn't know what the school year was going to look like. We have a lot that we were looking at. So I am impressed that our numbers came out to where they were. But we want to make sure that we're always building that membership, because the other thing is when you sign up for the conference, you have your membership. So we don't really want to lose people from this year to the next. So for everybody listening, if you have, you know, a coworker, a colleague, whatever the case might be, if they do reach out to their regional rep, all they need to do is pay that $10 membership fee, become a member, and then they still get access to all of the resources, which is a great benefit. I mean, for $10, it is like the gift that keeps on giving. There is a wealth of information. And those of us that have been doing this for years, I've loved the live binder because it's so nice to go back and reference the information as you need it. So it is just continually there for you to be able to access as that resource. So I don't know if Irene or Shayna would be opposed to that. I personally, if it's something that benefits people to do their position and increases our membership by having more of us out there, I'm totally for it.
I'm not going to speak for Irene, but I'm totally in favor of it. And also, I think it's a good teaser. We are going to have some best practice virtual sessions this year.
Yeah.
So that could be used as a teaser. And then again, just $10 for the virtual session gives you your membership and access to the live binder.
Yes. Thank you. Irene? You're muted.
Yeah, I think that it's a great teaser for the best practices, and there's nothing to say that we don't do that moving forward, you know, just to give everybody ideas and a look into what we're all doing, because I know Sheena and I just shared what we're doing, but I know you guys are all doing amazing things, and I would love to know what you guys are all doing. So I think that, you know, we're better together and we're able to learn from each other.
I just thought it was great. If I had not been a member and part of the board, I would have been like, oh, how can I get more information here? And so I was like, I just need to get some permission here because we intend to use it that way.
For sure, most definitely. And it does have all of that need to know information. I love that we're still incorporating best practices because, you know, the original agenda, even though it was adjusted, one of the big, basically a whole day was devoted to best practices. And there were some great plans that we had laid out that were going to take place this year at the conference with roundtables and other things to really make sure that we're meeting all of our members' needs, because we're only as active as what people need us. So if we're not addressing your needs and if we don't have the membership, then it really makes us non-existent. So it's very important that we continue to kind of mesh and build and grow in that way. And then I do have a couple questions. So I want to make sure I'm not missing them.
Do you want me to go back and answer the earlier special ed question?
Yes, if you could do that. And then Randy had just mentioned, she wrote hello, but I think she meant Zello, which was the old career cruising, has added work-based learning also. So I believe, Randy, that's what you're referring to. And then Selena had also stated about several states using that as accountability measure as far as work-based learning. So we're going to see some more things coming out when it comes to vendors. And then, yes, if you could go ahead and continue for the questions, Patricia.
Okay, so I know Jamie's on and Joetta. So if you guys need to chime in, add some stuff, I greatly appreciate it. Going back to the question about if a student is special ed and they can they be put on gen ed training agreement, and this has to do with that special ed, their hours and the amount of time designated as special ed time. Completely 100% you got to go with, if there is CTE placement, you have to follow the CTE, just as Jill had mentioned. But if they are a special ed transition work-based learning, you can go 2 routes with that. If they are receiving any kind of, if it's set up through special ed, and if they're going to have any type of services, then it has to be special ed time. I know we had a student that had to work on communication in a work setting to get, you know, he was a nonverbal student. So he actually had his speech services during work-based learning. So that has to be counted with his special ed time. So you just have to look at the situation. If they're in a CTE placement, then no, that's gen ed time. But if it is placed with special ed, then that's special education time. Just depends. I know there was another question.
I think there's a couple questions also about what we were just talking about as far as access. So let me try to address that.
Okay.
So the question was brought up, are we going to have people, you know, what's the benefit of still paying for the full conference rate if you get access to the resources? So this has been a policy that we've had in place for years. We felt as though a lot of coordinators might have just been hired in as a new coordinator at the start of the year, didn't know about the conference, didn't find out about the benefit until after the fact. So we decided years ago to open it up. As soon as anybody decided to become a member, they would still get access to those conference materials, because to their defense, they don't know what they don't know. And so if they're coming in new, they don't even realize they missed things. And it's our job as an organization to provide them with the insight, the guidance, to make sure that they are doing their position to the best, following all of those regulations. So this has been something in place for years. It's a little bit different this year because of us having a virtual conference. So we still want to keep, you know, the same policy that we've always had, because the same thing. I know my work-based learning numbers are basically non-existent right now because we were not knowing what we're doing for this school year, and for several other reasons. COVID has impacted my program immensely, and the district shut down some of my work-based learning programs due to COVID. So, you know, with that being said, we had so much uncertainty that we still want to make sure that we're providing those benefits of our information to the people, even if it's after the fact. Yes, they do pay for it at a reduced rate, but there's certain things that they're not gaining the benefit of, and we're just trying to hold to how we've always done it. Hopefully this is a year of kind of exceptions, and we'll kind of go back to the normal format next year. But maybe we found different things that we want to add, because maybe we found out certain benefits in what we're doing now that we can add to our conference in the future too. So, you know, it's not about making money when it comes to MCPA. We have to cover costs. We have certain individuals that, certain organizations that are involved with our conference that we need to pay those costs off. Our scholarships come out of those funds that we generate. So, and there's still some, you know, integrity that we want to maintain with MCPA, the conference, and all of the individuals that we do business with. So I will tell you, this was a hard decision too, when we were figuring out, you know, what do we do the rate for the conference, since it is changing. But we still are hopeful that you find the benefit in the money that you have put forward to your conference and to the membership. As far as the virtual offerings, as far as best practices, that will likely continue in a virtual format. These are new ideas that have just came out of the development and the change of this conference. So that is still in the works of what that's going to look like. When we're having to make changes to this conference, we're kind of figuring out where do we kind of cross those gaps that we've had from this new format. So that's the reason for those offerings. But I'm assuming they'll be virtual. I'm assuming there will not be a cost involved unless we have a cost as an organization. So if we have to pay a speaker or something else, there could be a cost involved for certain things. But if it is a format similar to this, then I don't expect to see any costs involved. And I think I addressed those questions. There's another one, Patricia.
Let me know when you want me to answer it.
Go for it. Thank
So Rachel James asked, I am somewhat concerned with placing my young adult students, special education 18 to 26 population, in work-based learning placements and having them come and go into our center-based programs with medically fragile students. What's the liability of our ISD? Should we be informing other students' parents that there are students coming and going to work placements? Is there any liability on the employer? So this is an individual district decision. I know there are some districts and regions that are not offering work-based learning this semester, and they're going to revisit next semester. I know personally, last week I met with one of our districts, and the district is holding off because of this exact question. They're concerned of if the student is out in the placement, there's a COVID, there's an exposure, that student has to quarantine, but they have since been at the school, now the school. So there's all those questions. So again, you're going to have to discuss that with your district. We do have centers with extremely vulnerable children that have medical conditions. So again, you need to just check with your districts. There's nothing at the state level about this. It's just individual districts. And there's another question that I saw.
The 30-day visit, was it?
Oh,
that?
yes. With TCLE, is there any way to do 30-day visits virtually instead of in person? I believe earlier Selena might have discussed this. If it's a virtual, didn't we just discuss this, that if it's in person, it's in person, and if it's virtual, it can be virtual. So again, we need to follow the state rules. And also talk with your pupil accounting auditor.
We also referenced our auditors. You will hear us say that a lot, because really your local auditor, when it comes to FTE, while we have to follow all the regulations, they are the one that's basically determining funding. So they are the closest to what you're doing, because they're going to know what they're looking for when it comes to regulating that and auditing that. So they really, sometimes people make them sound so intimidating, and I really wish our representatives that were available in our live binder, both Carrie and Brenda, they are amazing. They're my ISD auditors, and they are truly, I don't look at them as a foe. They are my advocate, they are my friend, and we work through the situations together. And they've been very approachable, even if there's something that I thought, you know what about this? Can we do this? They are very open, because they want to see what's best for you as a district and your students, as long as you meet their requirements and their guidelines. So really reach out to that local auditor. They really are the person that you're going to want to be running everything by. Anybody else have anything they wanted to add to that? Additional questions for Patricia? She is definitely, we have several on our board, but they know this stuff, because you look at things, work-based learning when it comes to CTE and everything else has its own nuances, but when it comes to special ed, they're kind of their own little entity. So we want to make sure if you do have questions that you have them to reach out to. And again, same thing, if you come up with a question later tonight, if it's 3 in the morning and it pops in your head as you sit up in bed, you can reach out to us as a board too. And we will have somebody that's able to respond to that from whatever topic area it is that you have a question on. Oh, looks like Irene just said, great minds think alike, Irene. I hadn't even seen that. So yes, make sure that you're reaching out to the board. That's what we're here for. And questions will come up beyond this 2-hour segment. So we know that, and that's why we do what we do. So reach out to us. Any additional questions?
Nicole, can I just make a quick statement about Sketch?
You can.
So anyone that is hoping to earn Sketch for this conference will need to, in the live binder, there is a QR code that you'll just need to hold up your camera to, and it will bring you to a Google form. You just have to fill in your information with your PIC number, and then you have to attend. It's all or nothing. So you do get credit for your asynchronous time of watching the presentations before. We wanted to make this as easy for you as possible and give you credit for the time that you took into learning this information. The 2 hours that you attended today, and then the final hour for your regional meeting. So if you notice on there, we're not going to award Sketch until January, because our regions do have until that time to host their meetings. So, but it is all or nothing. You can't just earn the 2-hour Sketch for today. You have to do the pre today and then the post meeting as well. and that is 6 sketch opportunities for you.
Which we are very fortunate for. So thank you for your hard work with that, because we did not know what we were going to end up with when we came to this new format. So it is definitely very generous and we're very grateful. So we want to make sure that we do follow that to the same integrity as possible. And I do want to say, Shayna, I was going to actually ask you a question next. If we run out, if we get to a point and there's no longer questions, do we need to stay live for those for the remainder of this hour?
That is a great question, Nicole. No, we do not, because we didn't do a 1-for-1 for the viewing. So we do have some buffer there.
Very good. And not that this is giving anybody, don't stop asking questions. Don't be like the students in class that think you're going to get out early and telling everybody don't ask any questions. But I want to make sure that I know that. We didn't know how many people would be live today, so we didn't really know how to gauge how much time we need. But I also don't want us all just sit here staring at each other if we've ran out of content. The question is, instead of pick, can we put certificate only? It helps out with GCDF and their CEUs.
I do not know that answer. If the person that asked the question can email me, I can check with our sketch person and see. I know that we did not register these for counselor sketch opportunities. So for anyone that's looking for counselor sketch, that these would not count for that. But I don't know for the other one. And I'll put my email in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Shayna. And it looks like Jill Ray said can do. Perfect.
Shayna, I'll put your email in the chat since you're driving.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you. Additional.
Now, I will say, and this is something that we can talk about later, but we can offer sketch opportunities for the best practice sessions. So if that's something that people are looking for, we would just have to get those approved. So we would need some time for that. But we could get approval for the best practice sessions moving forward.
Great, thank you. And somebody just asked a great question, and I just made a note to myself on this prior to the question coming out. How far out will we know when regional meetings are? Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for that because each region determines their own meetings. I will say I made a note on here that I need to get ours scheduled, but and I'm sure I'm like many others, I was waiting for this conference because I usually elaborate and field questions after the conference, and 2, I think many of us, again, didn't know if we were going to be back live face-to-face with students and what our work days were going to look like. Like if you are a hybrid, your work schedule could change versus a virtual versus fully, face-to-face. So I know many of us that are the regional reps are probably trying to wait for our schedule to become a little bit more solid before we can schedule anything else into our work day. So I know for anybody in my region, that's what I was waiting for, is to figure out where we're at. Like we're coming back hybrid and I don't even know when the timeline is to then go 100% face-to-face. And there's just a lot that's going on for many of us. So that's the other reason we've given it to January 1, is to allow for some people to kind of get more settled and to know what questions we have and what things we need to address in this next round. It would be nice that we'll have, after the fall update, we'll have some additional guidance from Selena, for example, as far as the work-based learning CTE document. So there is a benefit to having them a little bit later. I just don't know how much leeway you're going to have for knowing and planning.
So there was a question about the non-discrimination and individual disabilities. So the question says, there was a mention of a new addition to the non-discrimination statement specifically for those individuals with disabilities. Was that for our work or WP paperwork? I'm not recalling, it was in the live binder. So the non-discrimination statement is not specific to individuals with disability. This is a statement that when we were on Mackinac Island a couple years ago, a statement that has to be included at the bottom of the training agreement training plan. And it's for all work-based learning. It's not just for CTE or not CTE or transition special ed, and it's not for just individuals with disabilities, it's for all. So That's probably why it's not in the live binder right now, but I'm sure there's examples of it. I don't recall if there are any in this year's.
It was in the pupil accounting,
Okay.
that companion document is where I believe it talks about that, if I can recall.
Okay. So yes, that's for everybody.
Everybody's training agreement training plan. It will be an attachment within that. And then I think there was a question about sketches. So I don't know if I'm responding to this properly or not, but I think it might be talking about, I'm assuming, Michelle, you're talking about the best practice portion. If Michelle
I
wants to
think she's talking about the regional meeting, because that
okay.
the best practice would be additional sketches after this conference. So as a board, we'll meet this Friday, and we will, I'm not even sure if all our regional reps probably noticed they had to schedule a meeting. I assume there will be some virtual options. If you don't get a regional rep that schedules a meeting, or if it's a time that you can't make, Sheena and I were going to have kind of a catch-all general meeting that you can attend as well.
And a lot of times you can attend another region if necessary too. I mean, we are pretty open in that also. So if there's another region that's local to you, especially right now since it's virtual, there's not going to be a travel issue in many cases. So it does open up some of the boundaries that we've had in place in the past. Any additional questions, thoughts? If you're not sure who your regional rep is, that is available also. You can look it up based on your region, and then you can see who that individual is. So feel free to reach out to them. Again, if you're not receiving information, you think you should be receiving information, if you have a question, kind of the same way we talk about the auditors, they're going to be your other line of communication that can help field information back both ways to you. So if you don't know who that individual is, make sure that you get to know them too. And for those of you that are new, in a traditional conference, we usually try to gauge out our membership of who's at the conference and how many are, I don't like to say experienced or veteran, but how many have been doing this for a while versus how many are new to this position. And it was our hope this year we were going to try to pair you up in some form of a mentorship. That is still our hope at some point in the future, because when you are new, there is a lot that you're trying to acquire and a lot that you're trying to take in. We have terminology, we have paperwork, we have regulations, we have different authorities. So again, you're not in it alone. For those of you that this is your first time getting access to this information, please reach out to those regional reps or somebody else in your region that has had experience with this. And same thing with the other contacts that we have out there in that live binder, because it can be very overwhelming. Even those of us that have done this for years, usually at a conference, we're like, whew, I mean, it's just a lot of information that we put out there to you. So while I'm going to acknowledge you're probably overwhelmed, you know, don't sit in that area for long. Make sure you reach out for assistance and let us help you through that. Yeah, see, somebody said.
So Nicole, that was a great tip, and Irene, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you watch the presentation, we are still looking for a president-elect position. So for those of you that are excited about getting involved more, speaking as the past president, please reach out to Irene, Nicole, or myself and ask questions if you're worried about time commitments, because we would love for people to join us in the board and for the president-elect position. So again, if you've got any questions, please reach out to us, and we'd love to have you join us.
And that's important to say too. I remember those of you that are saying it's your first time, I literally was hired into my position. And then I think it was the next week, I found this conference. We used to have it in the summer. We used to have a summer conference, a fall conference. And I reached out to somebody in a local district that was doing work-based learning and said, oh, I don't know what to do. There's absolutely nothing in my office except for a manual from before I was born, which is a long time ago. And I'm like, I don't even know where to get started. And I luckily found out about the conference. And when I was at the conference, I'm like, okay, I'll help out with regional rep, because You know, what a great way to learn is by getting in the trenches and having all of these support systems there for you. So you don't even have to have a lot of experience. You know, if you're willing to learn and be a sponge to it, we look for whoever we can. And it really takes all of us to do what we do. It's not a singleton type organization. So, and again, same thing for when you're overwhelmed, like use us. That's what we are here for. So thank you for that. And I believe I saw a couple people put in here about regional reps and who they are. So yes, make sure that you do reach out to them. And Patricia is going to put it in the live binder also, so you can know who that is. Randy says, that's how I became treasurer. Yes. I mean, we really, not many of us walked in saying, sign me up for president-elect. Okay. Usually somebody has to make that phone call and say, oh, we think you'd be amazing at president-elect. Would you consider it? But I will tell you, if we can do it, you can do it too. Many of us are juggling, you know, a lot professionally, a lot personally. Work-based learning is now my smallest part of my position. And I'm still here, like not wanting to let go, because it's also one of my most passion areas of what I do work in. So we would love to have everybody participating whatever level you feel comfortable with. Any other questions?
It looks like Lori had one. She asked, did I take it correctly that there weren't many changes? It's always nice to have changes pointed out.
So are you, I'm not sure which one you're referring to. If you're referring to Jill or Selena, you know, there are some things, as they can have already elaborated to, that are getting moved into a next phase, you know, of updates. But as far as changes, just like pupil accounting, you know, we're kind of at a standstill. What the biggest change is figuring out how to do things in this different environment that we've had. But look through, you'll have to look through. I will admit, I've not looked through everything either. When they made this announcement that we're going back next week, I kind of had to put MCPA on like the back burner so I could actually get my building figured out right now. So make sure you do review everything that's there. And there's different things that you'll still catch even after you've heard it 100 times. There will be things that you're like, oh, wait a minute. So it's important to look at that. I don't know, Selena or Jill, if you want to highlight anything that you feel is really relevant that needs to be on their forefront of their mind.
Sure. For CTE, probably the biggest changes for work-based learning that have come out are that we really defined each of those categories, and then we're using those to track that student level data in CETUS instead of Navigator. So that would be probably the biggest one for CTE folks. Other than that, I mean, things are really still, you're still doing things in the same way, just that previously for our track purposes, you were putting student level data in Navigator, and we didn't have a coded system for you to categorize what those experiences were. So hopefully it'll make it a little bit simpler for teachers. And in the presentation that I passed to you, and I apologize for all of the recording hiccups with that so that you didn't get a recorded version, but it does show what it will look like in GEMS, and then what that data potentially could look like in CETUS, but it's not a great picture because we're still building that as we go. So you can take that presentation, and if you need to use it to show others, I think someone sent out all of the language that I would have used, kind of like the script that I would have used when recording that, so that you have that. So hopefully that's helpful, and you could use those slides and use that to educate teachers.
Very good point. Thank you, Selena. And I like how you're saying, you know, making sure that we're sharing that with others, because there are going to be different individuals. You know, you might not be the same person working in CETUS. There might be somebody else that does that. So we have to make sure that our chains of communication are always open with everybody that touches on these items. Jill, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think I kind of covered it with the COVID stuff.
Okay. Patricia, how about you? Is there anything that you wanted to add?
No, I'm good. And people can email me if they'd rather ask their specific questions, since Special ed is very specific.
Perfect. And then as far as pupil accounting, because we do not have somebody here right now with count day being on Wednesday, we're fortunate for everything we got from them right now. But again, just reach out to your local auditor. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, reach out to your regional rep, and your regional rep can also start to bridge that connection between you and that auditor. And a lot of times that's what many of us do at our regional meetings is we have our auditor there so that you can start to feel a little bit more comfortable with them and asking questions of them instead of it being such a stranger and so isolated. Cynthia, I would love it if you would like to share about the new website that is coming, the highlights of MCPA. Oh, you're muted, honey.
Keep forgetting that. Get so excited when
It's just like me and the record button.
Website. So many of you may or may not know that Ferris no longer is managing conferences, and so that meant that we were going to be coming to the end of a relationship with them. But in the interim, they also stopped managing websites. And so we had a very short period of time to flip the website into at least a place that we didn't lose the domain, we didn't lose information. And Irene was very diligent at just taking the steps and walking through and securing at least a place where our domain was. And I had a contact through having participated in Leadership Oakland that someone said, oh, you might just want to reach out to this gentleman. And so each of us brought to the table some opportunities of how we might manage the website moving forward. And it was chosen to go with Jim Filbert, who actually is our current host of our platform, using the domain that we have that Irene was able to secure. And in order to save some money, we said that we would take care of really the management if he could fill everything in with what came from our other website. And then I had to do some learning, although I will say that the new website's fabulous with regard to updates compared to our old website. So that has been really, really nice. But I want to give you a little peek. So if you could make me the host, I would like to share my screen.
I just did it. So you should be coming through an update.
So our new, if it will let me, let's see, share. There we go. Our new homepage is much more current looking. You will still see some things that might look like we're not quite there yet. Our conference information, even though it was out on our regular website, we wanted to maintain as we transitioned very similar information so that we could get an idea of what our site would look like. And our site looks pretty big here, but it doesn't look like I'm gonna be able to change that. So our mission and goal is right on the front page. We are going to have access on here to have memberships paid for on the site so that we will be able to manage that. It'll work with our finances, and we will do our conference fees through our site as well. So it's a little slow. So all of us on our internet, or at least me here, we have students that are doing their virtual learning, my grandchildren from upstairs. So nothing is like really pretty right now. This page just was a transfer of information. But for example, on our MCPA, about MCPA, and Jim is working with us that as I just get our basic information up, he's gonna make it look like that front page. And it'll be really very inviting to look at. This is what our conference, he just put a picture in there, but really has the ability to go in and kind of manage the information. And then here would be register, because we will be taking care of our own registration next year since we don't have Ferris doing that. So we needed a place to do our registration. We needed a place to do our membership and be able to take payment. And so it would look something like this, but here right now it's download paper copy. We're moving away from that, and it would be a link to our pay system. But just to be able to have our homepage and share that with you, and just let you know that it's coming. Now that we are through the conference, we did not want to change over to the new system while we were in preparation for the conference. So it was important to just continue to maneuver through this. And now that we're done, I can kind of give Jim the, okay, here's what our stuff is, and tell us what you want to do next, and get our pay all connected, and we'll be ready to go with a new website. So we hope that when it comes open, that you will enjoy it. We've tried to not be so static and to be very fluid in our website, and not that everything that's been done by everybody before us has not been good, because everybody puts their heart and soul into the work that goes on in MCPA. But we're growing along with the technology. And so I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to share that with you today.
It looks
I'm going to
wonderful.
give it back
Cynthia.
and share back with you. And let's see, what do? I say.
So you go to the right, and there's like little dots, and you'll click on that, go to more, and then you'll be able.
Got it.
I'm now the host. There we go.
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you for your work on that. It does look amazing. I think you're still sharing your screen somehow. How do I need to? I don't know why it's not doing that.
I just need to say stop.
There you go. I was like, there we go. Thank you for your work with that. You know, we have been limited. It's kind of like taking a skeleton and making the skeleton work with what we were using for our website. And we've done a great job with that, but it's another transition that we're going to, and another way that we're continuing to grow. And it looks very user friendly. It looks very clean. So thank you. I know whenever we change things, you know, it takes time and it takes effort and energy. So thank you for all of your work on that. It does look
You're
amazing.
welcome. My pleasure.
And we hope that you'll continue to use that, you know, for our members. Make sure you're making use of that. A lot of times, you know, that's kind of a starting point to go someplace else. So if you're having a hard time finding something like the work-based learning manual, you know, you can go from there, connect to the resources, and then jump on to OCT's webpage or whatever it might be. So thank you. Any additional questions? When will the Zoom replay be available? I do not know the answer to that. I know that it's recording right now, and I keep looking at it to make sure for some reason we've not lost that connection. I don't know how instantaneous it is, but once I have that recording, I will send it to Patricia, and then Patricia will make it available through LiveBinder. So when I am done, my hope is to go in and it will finish up whatever it has to do. I can send it to her, and I'll run my attendance report at that time also, so that we have that documentation too. I've got another big sticky note, so I will make sure I do that. So that is our hope, but based on, you know, timelines, I'd give it at least a day or so to complete that. It looks like it takes some time. So that's one reason I'm doing it from here, is I wanted to be on my work computer instead of at home. And Patricia's going to need some time to upload. So we are all doing the best we can with this being an addition to what we already have to be doing. So just be patient and conscientious of that, but we will get it to you as soon as we are able to. Any additional questions as we get ready to wrap up? Okay, I want to say again, thank you for all of you taking the time to be here tonight. I know we all have many options of what we could have done this evening, but it's necessary. You know, this is what allows us to be the professionals in the profession that we are in. Thank you to the speakers. You are always a wealth of information, and I appreciate the way that you convey your information. You allow us to have those dynamic relationships instead of, again, making it feel like we're being talked to. It's definitely a partnership. So I am so appreciative. Jill, Selena, you've always been wonderful to work with, and you've always been great, you know, even during these trying times when so much was happening. And as much as you felt like you guys were probably saying stuff to us, I know we felt like we were asking things of you too. So I just want to restate, we wouldn't be able to do what we do and support our members without you. So just thank you for being so good to work with. Huge, huge thank you. And then same thing to our committee and to our board. you all have no idea the amount of time that goes into what we do, and it's all led with passion. Our board members are dynamic. That's one reason I've not ever wanted to step away, because they are just great individuals. Their passion shines in all that they do, and I feel blessed to have them, not only as my colleagues in this, but many of them, we've watched each other's families' lives grow professionally, personally. So my thank you to all of you. I'm very, very blessed. And it looks like we're just to have some more people. So we were all that new conference, that new work-based learning coordinator at one time too. Just again, make sure that you all reach out. And even those of us that have been doing it for years, we all use each other. So make sure that you're reaching out, not only through the resources, the live binder, but through the people too. If you've not heard something from your regional rep in probably about another month, I would reach out to them and just send them an email, because we are going to be going based on our reports that we get from membership. So it's possible that we might have somehow missed somebody in a report. So don't hesitate, if you're not hearing something, to just reach out and see what's going on and making sure that you are on their list for that. The rest of the board, is there anything that I have missed before we get ready to close out? Anything I've not thought of? Okay, so just remember, you have the live binder there with all of the resources. Make sure that you finish out what you need to do for sketches while it won't get processed until January 1. Just don't lose sight of you needing to do that. So make sure you put something somewhere to make sure you finalize that and finish that. More information to come on regional meetings, more information to come on best practice. And with that being said, thank you to all of you, and it's done. I'm going to be dancing out the hallway when I leave here today. I will tell you, this is not how I expected this conference to go, but I thank you all for making it go so well. So, all right. With that being said, everybody have a wonderful evening, and we'll all be in touch soon. I'm going to stop my recording, and then I'll finish up that processing. So, thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Great job.
Yeah,
Thank you.